to me, it wholly enhances the experience when you have a human being on a microphone interacting with people. There was one gentleman named Jordan at Fury 325 at Carowinds, and he would start off as soon as the train left the station, he would say, if you could hear my voice, clap once. So we'd clap. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. And we'd clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. And after that, it was silent on the platform. He had everybody's attention. And then he could give the spiel.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing great today. How are you?
I am fantastic.
I love to hear it.
Yeah. So I got a question for you.
Okay.
So when you go on any kind of trip, whether it's to the grocery store, I know we've talked about, things from the grocery store recently, but, maybe it's a trip with your wife and that kind of thing. Are you looking for lessons or things that you can apply to your business, or do they just kind of pop into your head?
Well, first, I will say that the majority of trips that I have taken lately have, in fact, been to the grocery store. So there hasn't been that much travel in my recent past. With that said, I think part of my brain is constantly turned on for what's going on in the business, in the customer experience, the guest experience, the employee experience. Gaining inspiration from like the checkout lines at the grocery store, or like the music that's playing, or things like that, the way that they create that environment, which I guess I probably also do when I'm traveling as well. What about you? I think I know the answer I think I know the reason why you asked, but what about you, Matt?
I find that it's something that for the most part, I can't turn off that part of my brain, and I try at times, but sometimes just something happens that I'm like, ooh, that's a good way to look at something, or I hadn't thought of something that way, or that's something I've never seen before. And so I think there's always something going on in my brain that I'm going to file that away, or I want to write it down really quickly. And maybe it turns into a blog post. Maybe it turns into a conversation that you and I have. But I always think there's something in there that is working that way. And of course, part of the reason is for this conversation, we'll talk about Coaster NerdCon CNC 2024. But I also think that a lot of business people that we've talked to, whether it's on the podcast or just in general, they think that way too. Like you can't go places without noticing the trash cans or the ketchup dispensers or whatever it might be. So I think there's lessons everywhere, even on vacation. I'm not advocating to make your vacation about lessons, but we've always got our eyes and ears open. And I think we're going to get those lessons that we can apply later in different situations.
And I think that we can advocate for going on vacation, knowing that the lessons probably will naturally come to you. So I think there's a balance of saying, like, don't just go on vacation so you can take back some lessons, but go on vacation because that'll naturally be part of it.
Yeah, I think it's a nice byproduct.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't need a vacation, so I'm just trying to justify anything.
But definitely to advocate, go on vacation, use your PTO, all those things that, a lot of people will preach, but it's hard to do in the moment.
And particularly the industry that we're in, we need to practice what we preach because, you're kind of telling like your guests who come visit you that they should be disconnecting and taking their time off so they can, go to a theme park or zoo or museum or aquarium or FEC or anything. Yeah. Speaking of which, did you recently visit some amusement and theme parks and maybe learn some lessons from it?
I did. I had the immense pleasure and honor to visit 8 amusement parks in the kind of northeast Midwest region. Started at Knoebels, then we went to Hershey Park. We went to Kings Dominion, Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Carowinds, Dollywood, Kings Island, and Cedar Point. So it was an epic road trip. We had a ton of fun and we learned some things along the way. Do you want to talk about them?
Yeah, I guess so. That sounded miserable though. That's not you had to have had a horrible, boring, uneventful time going to all these, mundane places.
It was pretty much like that. We didn't crack a smile the entire time. We didn't laugh. We didn't joke. We didn't have inside jokes that we poked at each other. So yeah, this will be a pretty boring episode.
No, I'm kidding. I am always so jealous every single year of that week of I just love following you along on social media and the interactions that you're having and the stories that you are sharing. And it just sounds like just such a great fun time that, of course, as it relates to this episode, comes with a lot of practical lessons for our audience too.
Yes, some practical lessons, and I think maybe even some questions that you and I might just need to kind of brainstorm through and think about a little bit. But the first thing I want to do is not necessarily share a lesson, but I want to acknowledge the people that we got to see, the hardworking individuals that are working in our industry, and there are a lot of them. Like I mentioned, we went to 8 different parks, and every park had teams that were working their butts off to make sure that we were having a good time, that all the guests were having a good time, whether it was in rides, security, food and beverage, maintenance, merchandise, park services. I mean, we got to see people from all of those operational departments. And in so many cases, there were people that were just working hard. I mean, they were, diligently folding t-shirts in the merchandise shops. They were, making sure that our rides were efficient and safe. They were pulling trash and, sweeping up, and, maintenance folks were around making sure that everything was running properly. I saw security guards, watching certain areas of the park to kind of, follow along to see if anything was going to turn into something that it shouldn't, those type of things. So of course I've got my radar out for that, but it was really, really cool to see, especially when so many people are talking about still how hard it is to find people and the staffing challenges and things like that. There are so many good people out there, so many people that are dedicated to the industry, so many people that are dedicated to ensuring people are having a good time, that I really just wanted to start with that acknowledgement and a thank you to all those people that we got to interact with.
Very well said. And for context, you did this trip in the middle of July, which is arguably the busiest, the hottest time in the summer. And as you were saying that, I was actually kind of wondering, because you talk a lot about and have written a book about employee burnout, particularly within seasonal operations. When does that usually kick in? Is that around this time? I can imagine being like the busiest, most stressful times of the season.
Yeah, so typically we see that kind of after the 4th of July. We see that drop off. But I will say now the seasons at a sort of traditional seasonal amusement park is getting shorter, right? Because now some places are going full time until Labor Day, but now a lot of them are, just weekends in August because of school calendars, and schools are going back earlier. So their seasons are getting a little shorter. So, if I think about it in very general terms, we do see sort of that after that 4th of July peak, that there's sort of that drop off in performance and an increase in burnout. And I will say that there were some people that we saw out there that were probably, on that scale of burnout, higher on that scale of burnout, and, maybe weren't as motivated. But I think on balance, the people that we saw and interacted with that were excited and gung-ho and providing a great opportunity or a great experience far exceeded those people that we saw that, weren't cutting the mustard.
Yeah. And that was why I asked, because based on your observations, it sounds like these parks are doing a great job to keep morale going even past the point where you said burnout typically happens, which is after the 4th of July, and you being there very shortly after the 4th of July. So that's just amazing to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that, are you ready to get into some learnings?
Sure. That's
All
what I'm
right.
here for.
That's what we're here for. All right. So the first thing I want to kind of bring up is, and maybe I'll share the heading first, is that there's always more to the story. Okay. So we had the amazing opportunity to meet with a lot of people at different parks that we went to. Some, people that work there, people in management or owners of the various parks. And one in particular was talking about, a little merger that just happened. I won't share specifically who it was or what park it was at. But they had some very inside knowledge because they work for that particular company, went through the merger, have gone through other mergers, that company has been a part of. And it was so fascinating to hear them talk about what's really happening, what's really going on. I mean, there's so much speculation. There's so many people that are, basing what they see or what they hear on rumors and, what they think might be happening. But when you really hear the full story, to me, that particular story isn't as important as the recognition and the realization that there's always more to the story. So I think that's maybe a lesson in not assuming, right?
Mm.
So we see things, you and I see things from, I think, an interesting lens because we're enthusiasts, but we also get some inside information at times. And so we get to see kind of the balance of both of those things. And what I really took away from that conversation is that, the more we assume, the more we are probably going down the wrong path. And if we don't get the proper information, if we don't, hear it from the horse's mouth, then we probably don't have the full story. And the reason I think that's important is because, for what you do in your guest experience consulting and for what I do in leadership, like there's always another layer of the onion to peel back, right? And until you get to the core, you really don't know what you're dealing with yet. So that was one big lesson that I took away. And I want to share something else about that I will talk about the person that told us this, because it's Steve Balliet at Chocolate World at Hershey.
Recent podcast guest.
Recent podcast guest. He talked about the viscosity of chocolate. Something I never thought I would ever hear in a sentence, the viscosity of chocolate. And I asked him as he was giving us a wonderful tour of Chocolate World, I said, are there different kinds of chocolate, like for a Reese's peanut butter cup and a Hershey's bar? And he said, oh, yes. He goes, it all depends on what that chocolate is being used for. So if it's being used in a bar, if it's being used in a Reese's cup, in order to hold the peanut butter, is it? Oh my goodness. And like the Hershey Kiss is a little different. Like, so there's the viscosity of chocolate. There's different formulas for the chocolate. It's all Hershey's, but based on what it's being used for, there's a different formula. And again, to me, this ties into what that other conversation was about, because maybe that's not something you think about, the detail that goes into what we need to think about in terms of how this chocolate is going to be used. So again, there's a lot more to the story than we see on the surface. And I think we should not assume, but also dig deeper so that we can find what's at the core.
So what's the ultimate takeaway here for our audience? Because with both of those examples right there, the consumer only sees the end result, kind of the front facing, the marketability aspect of two major corporations that are merging, or multiple different kinds of chocolate and their viscosity depending on what particular product that they're going into. And is it about being curious, or is it about acknowledging that we may not know all the answers, and maybe we need to allow ourselves to recognize that we might not know all the answers, while knowing that there is more out there that we can ask about, and withhold our judgment until we see the full picture?
I think it's all of that, right? I think the more experience I have, the more I know that I don't know. Right. And I think that's a big part of that lesson, is just recognizing that we likely don't have all the information. But I also think there's a guest experience angle to this as well, because as we think about, more and more experiences that we can offer to a guest, maybe there's something in there to help educate them that can be part of an educational tour that maybe they pay for, maybe it's included, but it gives them a behind the scenes view. Like at Chocolate World, there is that ride that you can go through. There's other experiences that you can have. But maybe that's something that you can, again, kind of open the doors to your operation, which helps create a deeper bond between
Yeah.
you and your guest when they know more about that. Steve was showing us the make your own chocolate bar and the Reese's cup where you get to you build your own Reese's cup and fill it with whatever you want, and those kind of experiences when you learn more about the product. I mean, I love Reese's cups anyway. There's not much more that's going to get me to love them more, but to attach me to the company and to create even greater loyalty, like I think there's a lesson there that maybe we can let the guest in even more to those experiences that would help bond us together.
It's kind of like pulling back the curtain a little bit of being able to see how the chocolate is made. Notice I kind of changed the metaphor right there. And or even a behind the scene, like an engineering tour in a theme park of like, how do these rides work? Or behind the scenes in a zoo and an aquarium. It gives you a deeper appreciation for what the organization does. And then, yes, it creates a stronger connection between you and that organization, or to the individuals behind it that power it. So I think that's a really good takeaway.
Awesome. You ready for the next one?
Sure.
All right. This one I think you will appreciate based on your previous role as a spieling ride operator.
Yes.
I feel like the trend of the spieling ride operator, I feel like it's been coming back, and I think it's now back with a vengeance. Okay. At every park we were at, there were automated spiels, but they were secondary to the ride operator spieling, interacting with the guests, obviously giving the safety announcements and that type of thing. And we've probably talked about this before. To me, it wholly enhances the experience when you have a human being on a microphone interacting with people. There was one gentleman named Jordan at Fury 325 at Carowinds, and he would start off as soon as the train left the station. He would say, "If you could hear my voice, clap once." So we'd clap. "If you can hear my voice, clap twice." And we'd clap twice. "If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times." And after that, it was silent on the platform. He had everybody's attention, and then he could give the spiel, right? And he'd say, "We have 35 seconds to get the other guests off the train and you on the train. Here's how it's going to go." And then he would talk about, doing the seatbelt. And then he and other people would say, "Seatbelt first, lap bar never," right? Because they were going to put the lap bar down, right? So anyway, so he had other fun things that he was saying, but he had our attention. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do when you have all those people that are excited about the ride, they're talking to their friends, they're probably not really tuned into the spiel, but it was almost like he was putting on a show. He was on the exit side of the platform, and we had like all of our attention was on him. I thought it was really, really cool. There were other instances at different places. Keon at Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion was amazing on the microphone. He would say things like, so there was a blue and a green train, and he'd say, "Blue train, how do you know you're not on the green train?" "Because it's blue." Like, I mean, silly things like that, but it just makes you laugh. It enhances the experience, and it really does, I think, create an interaction between that, ride operator, that spieler, and the people on the ride, even more so than just checking the restraints, if that makes sense. So I think the spiel, and I'm a huge fan. The personalized spiel, the opportunity to make some jokes. Another quick example on Maverick, they were making all kinds of jokes about Steel Vengeance because they said, "Who wants a loud chain? We will put you silently up the hill, with our launch." And then he's like, "We're going at this angle. You're going to descend at this angle, which is steeper than Steel Vengeance." So they listed all these things, and he's like, "These 3 reasons are why we're better than Steel Vengeance." And it was fun. I think that's my ultimate takeaway, is that it was fun. You're allowing the team member to use their creativity to create some fun for the guests, and we're the beneficiaries of it.
Well, Matt, you were right. I do appreciate that. And I'll kind of start with my reaction to this is an automated spiel allows for consistent delivery of information, which if you've got the safety instructions that need to be delivered to every guest every single time, the automated spiel does that.
Yeah.
The three examples that you just shared, a combination of those three right there, shows two things. One, the greater level of a personalized experience for the guest. So the ride itself, you just told me about Fury, Twisted Timbers, and Maverick. I already know that those rides are fun. You already know that those rides are fun. You did not tell me about how great those rides are. You told me how great those team members are, right? The ride was more fun because of those team members. The ride, in theory, will be exactly the same every single time you ride it. But now you're creating a dynamic, very different experience, an ever-changing experience based on the individual who's got the microphone. So they are the ones who are truly elevating the experience. They are increasing your enthusiasm as the rider. You're probably clapping louder, screaming louder when you pull back into the unload station, and that's what you're carrying with you when you walk out down the exit ramp. The second part of it, though, too, and this is about Jordan at Fury, is the way he captured everyone's attention to be able to deliver the information that he needed to deliver. So he recognized, hey, I need to say all these things to the guest to ensure an efficient, smooth, safe operation. But the way that I say it is going to impact the way it's received. Now, an automated spiel can't do that because you know that a very large percentage of people simply aren't going to be listening and paying attention to the automated spiel. He was able to capture everyone's attention. The clap once, clap twice, clap three times. I've personally never seen that before. I think that, and you said everyone on the station was silent. Therefore, the second that he started talking, it was important. So part of that is a little bit of kind of the comparison to Southwest Airlines of like, you are much more likely to listen to the flight attendant's instructions when they're being funny, right? So there's part of that, but also the way that they're able to capture the attention and elevate the experience all at the same time, which makes it a million times more effective and better than an automated spiel.
100%.
I guess long story short is I agree with everything you said.
Well, and here's what's maybe the other side of that coin, right? Because I will say that not everybody was that enthusiastic, right? Not everybody was doing those kind of spiels. And you could tell when there wasn't that interaction, there wasn't that relationship. Like when we came back on the train and Jordan, not just any ride operator, when Jordan asked us, how was that ride? We exploded. Like, I mean, we were making all kinds of noise and everything.
You don't want to let Jordan down.
Exactly. We want to let him know that his hype to get us going, it was worth something.
Mm-hmm.
There were some operators who would do that same thing. I mean, their spiel was not necessarily as animated. They didn't necessarily get our attention. They said all the right things. And then when we came back on the train, had a good ride, maybe it was a different ride, and they would say, okay, riders on blah, 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 how was that ride? And the enthusiasm was down a little bit. Exactly right. And then they would say, well, two people liked it, you know? And so I really like their reaction that they're getting from the train absolutely is a result of the energy that they're putting in as well, if that makes sense. So I think that there's the expectation that just because they had a good ride, that's what's going to get them excited at the end. But I really think it comes full circle, right? Or comes full circuit, you know, if you think about a roller coaster. So you get people hyped up in the beginning, they're much more likely to even have a better time on that ride. And then when you come back in, then it's the culmination. It's the final act. It's their way to kind of show appreciation, not just for the ride, but also for the people that have been, creating that experience for them.
Yeah. Nailed it. Yeah. Boom. All right. Number 3.
So I've got one that goes along with that.
Cool.
Because as great as some of those spielers were, sometimes the sound system did not support them, right?
Mm.
So there were some times when I could kind of understand people. There are some that were like crystal clear, like Mavericks is really, really good. Like it's like, and part of it too is how people are using the microphone. I think sometimes they feel like they have to, like if they're wearing one of those headsets, they have to push the microphone right to their mouth, and that just makes it garbled. There was one person on Millennium Force, the person at the exit platform, he held the mic like 2 feet away from his mouth, right? It was very sensitive microphone, and I could hear everything he was saying perfectly, because the way the mic is designed to pick up the sound, if you get too close, then it will, I don't want to get too into the technical part of it, but it'll create much more of that low end frequency, that boomy frequency, and it will not be as intelligible when you are trying to broadcast that over a PA system. So I think there's a couple of things going on. Number one, does the system, the audio system, and this is a detail, right? I mean, do you have to have this for the ride to be running? If you have the automated spiel and it's kind of coming out, you can kind of hear it, you're probably good. The ride's running, the chain's working, the brakes are working, the restraints are working, you're going to open that ride. But this detail, I think, can really help enhance the experience. So again, on Maverick, Steel Vengeance has a good PA system. Like it was adequate enough, it was powerful enough that we could hear it. The people using the microphones were using it in the proper way. So I think part of this is the system itself. Part of this is people knowing how to use the microphone. And then the other thing is sometimes how quickly people are saying it. Like you say the same spiel over and over and over again, and you'd be able to say it really, really fast and blah, blah, blah. And so there's that FedEx effect, when you're saying things so fast that like you can catch every third word. So you want to make sure that you're not saying it too fast. You want to get everything in, but not saying it too fast so that people can't understand it. But the sound absolutely matters. The way that it's projected, the way that people are using the microphone has a big impact on whether or not that spiel is delivered and people can actually hear it. Because there were a couple of rides where I could tell people were trying, like the ride operator, they were trying to, get the crowd going and things like that. But because of the speakers and because there wasn't enough power behind the system, we just couldn't hear it. Or it sounded, garbled, or it sounded too tinny, and it just did not get over the noise of the station. So along with those spiels that I'm 100% for coming back, we also have to have the sound system to be able to support it, and the microphone technique to be able to do it properly.
So I'm pulling back from this and really thinking your systems need to support your people, your employees, because that sound system, that's a tool for them to be able to do their job. If that's not working properly, they cannot properly do their job. There was one time I was delivering a guest experience workshop where the microphone was garbled, and I had more than 100 people in the room, and they fixed it about halfway through. But the first hour or so of the workshop, I don't know how well my content actually hit, and it wasn't because of the way I was delivering it. It had to do with that system, and you can apply that to a lot of other job functions or even job duties within your facility. Like your ticketing software needs to be user friendly for that employee and needs to work quickly for them to be able to sell a ticket, right? Your turnstiles and your barcode scanning, all of those things that go into every single aspect, everything you are giving your employees to use needs to support them. So needs to consider the employee experience, because it will impact the employee experience and therefore trickle down to the guest experience. So in many of the instances you said, and you said it was a combination of the system and sometimes actual like microphone techniques. So that's probably a training issue of like, here's how you use the microphone that you're expected to use. But in those instances where the system itself is not working as well, impacts the employee experience, but then it definitely negatively impacts the guest experience. And I will say, particularly if there's safety instructions involved, this might be a high priority or go to those automated spiels if you if you need to, if the system can't support the people to be able to do that.
Well, and speaking of the tools that people use, I had another experience when we were at Cedar Point on two different occasions when we were talking to people in management, and we were asking about, I don't know, the meal deal or something like that. And in two separate cases, people pulled out their phone, went to the app, and they got the information. And I just thought it was so interesting and great that they knew that the app would have the information, right? We always talked about the map, the paper map, that 95% of guest questions can be answered in that paper map. But they had the confidence in their app to go get that information. And that doesn't happen overnight, right? Making sure you have the right information and then just feeling like, or being conditioned to say, this is the first place I'm going to go for information. I remember way back in the day when we would have to, really encourage people and train people, have a map with you, go to the map that's got even if you have to look for a little bit, you're going to find the information that you need. So I just thought it was great that they had the app, that they trusted the app, and that they knew that that was the first place they should go for that information. Right.
Yeah.
Because I think there's probably a lot of information at a team member's fingertips that they don't realize.
Exactly. Yeah. And just like how training employees to use the map is now training employees to use the app. So it's a tool that they can use. It's not just for the guests to be able to plan their day. And also shout out to Attractions.io for, amazing app development, former previous sponsor on the podcast here, that they just do an amazing job with app and digital map creation.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. All right. So you ready for another one?
Let's do it.
All right. So this one is about guest behavior impacting operations. So you're familiar with the Beast at Kings Island.
I am.
Are you familiar with how popular night rides are?
I am.
Okay. The guest behavior and desire to ride that ride in the dark has changed the way that they operate, not the ride, but how they operate that part of the park. Okay. So at 10 o'clock, there's a fireworks and drone show, right? After 10 o'clock, the park is closed, except for the Beast.
Woo!
So they know that their guests want to ride the Beast in the dark. And especially this time of year, even like 9:45, it's still kind of light out, Yeah. But what they've done is they said, okay, we know people want to ride. So we're going to let people get in line. They can wait there during the show. For people, we had fast lane. So there was a special person out at the exit, to stop us from going in line. But as soon as the fireworks were over and they were all clear, they could let us in, and then they would put everybody on the ride. And I just, like, they didn't have to do that. You know what I mean? They didn't have to run that ride later. The staff has to stay later. It takes longer for maintenance to close it down. They've got less time between the shutdown that night and the, opening it up in the morning. So they didn't have to do that, but I think they recognized how important this was to the guests. What a unique factor that they have in this particular ride. There's no lights out in the woods where the train goes through. So why not give them the opportunity to do that? It's not an extra charge, right? It's part of your admission. As long as you're in line at the right time, you're going to have that experience. So I just thought it was interesting. And I know that there's a million examples of this, but how the guest behavior and the guest desire actually impacts and changes an operation.
Yeah. It really shows a guest-centric mindset that they're taking, because the rest of the park justifiably closes at, what'd you say, 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock.
Yeah. Whereas it had just gotten dark at that point. Now, later in the season, this probably isn't as much of a concern when you're getting closer to, Eastern Standard Time and, it's getting darker much earlier. You've got the night rides at, 6:30, 7 p.m. or so. So this is really unique to see, because I wonder what led to this. This is kind of sparking my curiosity of, was there a lot of feedback that said, we wished we could have ridden the Beast at night, but when the park closed, it was still relatively light out. We'd love to see you extend, the hours just for the Beast. And there has to be enough aggregated, quantifiable demand to justify that. Because how much later was it kept open?
Well, we got on at probably 10:30-ish.
Okay.
So it took probably about 20 minutes to clear the show and for them to get the okay to go ahead and open. And then because we were fast lane, we were some of the first people that got on, so we were probably 10:30, but there was probably another 25 or 30 minute of operation left with the people that were still in line. So they probably weren't getting on
11
until
o'clock?
about 11 o'clock,
Okay.
the last riders.
And then, there needs to be and obviously this is something you and I, we could spitball and say, okay, well, how does this impact the business? Well, keep the retail shop open, sell ride photos, and, and ideally being able to make up the cost of operating and the labor and, everything it takes. And security now needs to kind of do a separate sweep to get people out, because it's way in the back of the park, right? It's not like it's right by the entrance if you're just funneling people out, through the park exit. But clearly there's enough demand throughout the entire summer, I imagine, to do that on a daily, regular basis.
I would imagine. And again, I wasn't in the room. Neither one of us were in the room when this decision was made. But I can only...
All speculation.
Right, all speculation. We need to peel back the onion more. We need to, be able to get to the core of this. But what I would probably say is that, again, because they have this ride that they built, to be the biggest, longest, fastest at the time, wooden coaster, this amazing attraction. And, I don't know at the time that they built it, were they thinking, oh, by the way, at night, it'll be dark out there, it'll be really cool? Or was that sort of a happy accident afterwards that people said, if we could ride this, when it's really, really dark out, that would make it scarier. When we seem faster, all those different things. And that could be something that they kind of hang their hat on. And now when you talk about, or talk to people in the enthusiast community and you talk about night rides on the Beast, almost everybody knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's not something that is new, but it is something that I think they've been able to capitalize on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the Beast, I just looked up the year it opened. I didn't know the exact year. 1979. Is that 45 years?
Yeah.
So think about just creating something that really stands the test of time, that 45 years later, the park needs to extend operating hours just for this one ride because of its substantial popularity. And it's not the tallest and fastest ride in the park. They have a giga coaster there, right? Arguably, yes. But I know there's some questions on it. Is it not, right? And Hypercoat, right? They've got some of the best lineups of coasters and thrill rides around, and the Beast still really establishes its dominance and its position of saying, no, this ride's going to be even better, even more wild at night, and you got to keep the park open for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know they've done a lot of track work, and it's much smoother and much more re-rideable than it has in recent years. Although I will say the very, very back seat is still wild, especially going through that vortex at the end. Amazing.
Sure, especially at night.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I have one more.
Okay.
This one.
Two more.
I'm sorry?
One more or two more?
Well, I've kind of combined a couple as we've been going along. So I think I said I had 6. But this one is maybe more of a question and a discussion than necessarily a lesson.
Okay.
So I know that we have a lot of folks on the podcast that talk about how people are looking for more and more immersive experiences and more interactive experiences. And I think, the example of the spiel lesson, I think is about interaction. That's one way that we can, interact with our guests. But what I started wondering in some of these parks is, what's the real definition of immersion and interaction? And what kind of interaction are you trying to foster? And I'll give you a quick example. Well, I might give you a couple examples, but I'll give you one to start with. Steel Vengeance. You have to put your phone and your wallet and anything that might be in your pockets into a locker. So when you walk up to the platform, you're on platform level, you're at the top of the stairs. There's a great shot of the lift hill. There's a great shot over the lake. I mean, how much free advertising could they get from allowing people to take pictures up there? But we didn't have our phones up there, so we couldn't do that. So guess what we had to do? We had to talk to each other. What? Yeah. So this created, like, not having your phone in line created an, not that we were always on our phones and weren't talking to each other, but this fostered another level of interaction and interactivity, and I might even argue immersion into the experience, because that's all we had to experience. Talking to other people in line, talking to each other, like, it just created this focus on the experience more than anything else. And to me, that's as immersive. Well, it might be arguable, but putting on a headset and calling that immersion, that's one version of it. But I think this is another version of immersion. And also another example, at Dollywood, they have these. They're doing sort of a summer activation. These little things all over the park, that are kind of cool things visually, or there's something to do. And one of them is these little pods that you can get onto and spin. Like, you physically have to move it to spin it, right? And you can probably put 2 or 3 people on there, and they've got kind of bungee material, so it's soft, and there's different configurations. Some are enclosed, some are all open. There's, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them, and they're all manually operated. And I thought about that as being so low tech, but also so immersive and so interactive, that I wonder, and maybe this is the conversation part of it, I wonder if in some circles we're only thinking about immersion and interactivity from a electronic technological standpoint, when there's already a lot of that in what we do, even from a low-tech perspective. So I'll leave it at that, and get your feedback.
Well, 2 things. One is connecting this to lessons from Iceland, where you described being in an ice cave as an immersive experience, right? And that wasn't too different than how you described being on the platform at Steel Vengeance.
Yeah.
Right. It also reminded me, last summer, I took a trip where I visited several parks, including a couple of the ones that were on this trip, but I went further east. And at Six Flags Great Adventure, we all put our phones in the locker at King Ka. And after we rode King Ka, we went and did a bunch of other stuff before going back to our locker, which meant we're on the sky ride, and I'm looking out, and on one hand was like, oh, this would be a great place to take pictures. And on the other hand, I'm like, just sit here and I'm just going to look at this and I'm going to talk to my friends, right?
Yeah.
That to me gave that same feeling of that immersive experience. So when I think of what does immersive really mean, whether it is high tech or low tech, I think it's just about being fully present in your environment. And if you're with other people that you're traveling with, at this point, Cedar Point, wasn't that your last stop?
It was.
Did you guys have anything left to talk about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. True. Fair. Yeah. But, at that point in the trip, you could say, well, we've exhausted. We're all just going to stand here, right, in silence, right? If you had your phones, that might have been the point in your trip. You're at the back of the park on the last park that you're at. Be like, well, let me just, thumb through, social media. We don't have anything left to talk about. Required you to look around and to talk about things, right? If you are in a VR experience where you've got the headset, you're now fully present in a different environment. If you're at Jump by Limitless Flight in Salt Lake City, right, you are fully immersed into an experience where you are, base jumping or, jumping, out of a plane, right? Or in the, in that type of circumstance, whether it's a real or fabricated environment. So I agree that the word immersion definitely has been associated with technology and digital experience and kind of transportation to a whole nother place in time. But I think it's regardless of what it is, you're just fully present. And maybe that means you can't have your phone on you, right? Like that, maybe that's like a baseline. When you're riding a ride, when your phone's in your pocket or in a locker, right? As long as you're adhering to the no loose article policy, right? You're not scrolling social media on the lift hill, right? Or taking pictures while you're on the ride. You are fully present in that experience. Therefore, you are fully immersed into all that the experience has to offer. So I think, you're right. We do need to look at the word immersion, both from the digital and the analog standpoint, of saying that's what we're doing, regardless of what sector of the industry you're in. That's one of the ultimate goals of the guest experience.
Absolutely. And I think, kind of redefining that immersion word, like, what are you trying to immerse people in? And I love the way that you said you're just being fully present. Are you trying to immerse people in time with their family? Because that's one thing, right? Are you trying to immerse people in a world that they've never seen before, like Jump? Are you trying to immerse people in something, that's completely out of the realm of what they thought possible, whatever it is, right? And I think one of my big takeaways, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up, is because, again, a lot of people are talking about immersion from a technological standpoint, but I think there's also, for people who don't have the budget or the means to, do something like that in a really effective way, to think about low-tech ways, like those, I don't know how much they cost, but those things that Dollywood put up, little spinner thingies, I mean, like you see on a playground, and I saw people using them every time we walked by, so it was really cool to see people using those kind of, immersive type of experiences, even though they're so low tech, and likely so low in terms of the cost.
Yeah, exactly. It's hey, here's a way that people can occupy their time for a few minutes, and then you realize how much people truly enjoy that, and then that adds to the value of the day, because it kind of exceeds expectations, because it's probably not on their list of like, these are all the rides, shows, and attractions we need to do. It is something that we can do spontaneously and get a few minutes of enjoyment and walk away laughing and smiling and being together and, taking pictures. I mean, there's a memory that I have from a trip to Walt Disney World when I was in high school, and my little brother was in preschool, and we were at the boardwalk, and we were walking around, and there was like a funhouse mirror, and I was tasked with watching my little brother for a few minutes. And when the whole family came back, I was just holding him by his ankles, and he was just upside down. He was laughing, right? So similar type of thing, very low tech, but it was something like that actually created a memory that lasted a very long time. He used that in his speech at my wedding, right? And it was recalling on that experience, kind of similar to those spinny things at Dollywood, of saying, hey, here's a way to kind of immerse people into something, even if it's for a brief period of time, of don't allow them to think about anything else except this right here, right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that was my last one in terms of my takeaways from CNC, although I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours and hours about some of the other experiences, but those were the big ones.
Cool. So to give a quick recap, number one, there's always more to the story. Number two, the spieling ride-up is back. Number three, your systems need to support your people. Number four, guest behavior impacts your operations. And number five, what is the real definition of immersion? Did I sum that up well?
Very well.
Cool.
Very well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, well, thank you for going on this journey after the journey with me. We're already planning CNC25. Can't give out any details of that yet. But I would like to throw out to the people listening, because I know a lot of people go on trips, you visit places all the time. If you have lessons that you've learned or things that you've taken away from those experiences, share them with us. attractionpros@gmail.com. Find us on the socials. We'd love to hear those. And heck, if we get enough of them, maybe we'll create a whole episode based on those lessons.
Ooh, that's a really good idea. All right, there we go. There's your assignment, all of you out there. So we really appreciate it, Matt. I always enjoy, like you said, going on this journey of the journey, or journey after the journey of your CNC trips, and looking forward to seeing where you're going to go in 2025. And for everyone out there who is watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.